Okay, let's start talking about this. Let's start with verse 3. I say, of the holy people in the land, they are the noble ones, in whom is all my delight. Talk to me about that verse. Any thoughts, feelings, observations?
Who is the one that experiences delight? Is it the psalmist or
David?
So that's interesting that David finds delight in other noble people.
Yeah. David finds delight in the other noble folks. What else?
I wonder, because last time we were talking about how when he wrote this, or when he was talking about this, he was on the run.
Yeah.
Quite literally. And I wonder if he's talking about the people that are helping him while he's on the run.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Or like those are the holy people that are in the land, the ones who bring him joy in his own darkness.
Yeah.
Helping him along.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and hardship does amp up the amount that you feel things for people that are helping you along the way. Yeah. Other thoughts?
At first glance, it like kind of annoys me because I'm like, who's noble? You know, I can
Yeah.
never be noble. Can anyone really ever be noble? But then you go on to read verse 4, and it's talking about like those who don't run after other gods but worship God. Doesn't mean like we're perfect or living so righteously,
Yeah.
but it means that you're seeking after the true God.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was first praying this thing every day, it felt like a little overstated. Like, really, that's all my delight is in the other noble people? Like, what about delighting in God or something? And it might be a little bit of hyperbole, but I think there is something good about how much he delights that there's other people who are after God with him. Yeah. What else? Chris has got something.
No, I'm actually just laughing.
Oh, okay, never mind. All right. All right, I think the next few verses we might have. Are you guys still around? You look like you're caught. They're frozen. Jana, do you want to try to work on this and see if we can make it work? Yeah.
We're here. Can you hear us?
Oh, you're back. Okay. Very good. So, go for it.
Sometimes my response in tragedy is around me pursuing me, and I'm like, he's here in this light. Sometimes my response would be to be angry. Hey God, like, why are you doing this? And his response is the opposite. Like, you alone are my portion and my cup.
Yeah.
So it's just this, like, you are all I have, and people that follow you are the only people that I can bring.
Yeah.
That I want to be with, or that like fill me and I find delight in, you know.
For sure. Yeah. So here's what I want to say about that little line, and I'm going to say it about 5 different ways. Is the delight of God is a delight that comes from seeing what God is doing in the lives of others. Right? The delight of God is the delight that comes from seeing what God is doing in the lives of others. So the Apostle Paul, listen to how he starts. Pretty much all of his letters start this way. To the Romans, he says, "First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is being reported all over the world." Then to the Corinthians, he says, "I always thank my God for you because of his grace given you in Christ Jesus." Then in Ephesians, he says, "For this reason, ever since I heard about your faith in the Lord Jesus and your love for all God's people, I have not stopped giving thanks for you, remembering you in my prayers." Philippians is my favorite one. There's others. I'm not going to read them all, but I thank my God every time I remember you, In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. I could read others, but you get the point. Like Paul, whenever he started writing his letters, he always started by saying, I'm pumped about what God's doing in you. There's this sense that that's the reason that he's doing what he's doing, that he's got the drive that he has, that he puts his pants on in the morning and goes and be Paul, is because he's pumped about what God's doing in other people's lives. And me too. That's why I've got pants on today instead of sweats, because I'm pumped about what God's doing in you guys' lives. And praying this over the last 5 months, every time I get to that part, it's this invitation. And I'll go through in my head and think about like how cool individuals are. And yeah, it's been this invitation to draw delight from the work that God is doing in you guys. And something that'll happen often is people will be talking with me or Deanna about something deep and hard, and they'll be like crying, and they'll be like, hey, I'm sorry to be burdening you with this or laying this on you. And I'm always like, no, stop it. Because seeing this kind of transformation in people is like what we're here for. Like, that's why I'm still doing this. Is why, like, that's what gives my life meaning, right? So if you want the delight that God has for you, the only way to do that is to be invested in what God is doing in other people. That's the way that it happens, right? And especially like in just secular Seattle, if you want to have a spiritually rich life, you've got to be tapped into that and caring about that. And it's the sense of like, even as this tidal wave of secularism is coming in, that's making most people not believe in God, that God is calling out what a lot of people are calling a holy remnant, a remnant of people who are still sensitive to God's voice in the middle of that. And that it's exciting to get to be a part of that with other people. Yeah, like you said, he's not focused on the people who are after him trying to kill him. He's focused on the few that are responding to God's voice and are with him, and that's what he's pumped about. And we need to get pumped about that too. The pandemic is habituating us to be comfortable with solitude. And so community is going to be harder after this. Like, finding friends in adult life was already hard before this.
Seattle.
Congratulations, it just got harder because people are now addicted to their phones much more than ever before. And people are used to being at home. There's going to be less social stuff that happens, et cetera, right? And so I also want to challenge our church in particular, because I think a dynamic that happens here sometimes, especially being a small church like this that Deanna and I recently started, it's like a lot of people feel connected to me and Deanna, like they're here because they know and love me and Deanna, and they know we love them, which is great. I'm glad you feel that way. I'm glad we feel that way. But our church needs to grow beyond that. And so for some people who feel like their main connection is with just me and Deanna, the question is like, we say we want to be a community, not an event. So what are you doing to make that happen? And if you find yourself thinking, as I know a lot of people, like this is a natural thought that a lot of people have in adult life, is why aren't there the kinds of friends that I had when I was young? And why aren't there the kinds of friends that I want? If you can flip your thinking to who are the people that God has put in my path, in my life, in my spiritual community, and how can I be the friend that they need? That perspective shift is super critical for being fulfilled and being the type of person who whose delight comes from seeing what's happening in other people's lives. And so our community right now, it needs, we've just lost a bunch of rad people who had to move on because of pandemic stuff. We lost our Jimmys, our Joshes, our Garrisons. Like, there's people leaving that were just community-minded people that, and there is this hole now, this empty space where it's like, who's going to step up and be the one to invite people out to do some rad, fun thing? Be that person. Step into the gap. But more than our church needs that, you need that. Much more than our church needs that. If one individual decides not to like commit and go all in with community, we'll be fine. We'll still be here out here doing it. But you need it. You need it. Because if your life isn't about seeing spiritual transformation of God happening in other people's lives, like what is it about? What else is there for it to be about? You need it. Yeah, because the delight that comes from God is a delight that comes from seeing what God's doing in other people's lives. So, I'm done preaching about that. Let's talk about the rest of the passage. It says, those who run after other gods will suffer more and more. I will not pour out libations of blood, libations to such gods, nor take up their names on my lips. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. Talk to me about it. What does it mean?
So libations of blood, that's kind of the thing that I kept on circling around, not because I think it's great, but because I think it's horrifying.
Yeah.
And I guess I have questions about, is David being hyperbolic here? Because I was under the impression that his primary, antagonist was Saul. I don't remember Saul pouring out libations of blood to the same Hebrew God, but maybe I'm just forgetting that part. So I guess let's talk about libations of blood. That's the part that kind of, struck me.
Yeah. I'll write that down and come back to that.
We define that really quickly.
So I've always been operating under the assumption that it's people who are worshiping other gods and that they're making sacrifices of blood sacrifices to other gods. Yeah. I think he's saying but Saul may not have done exactly that. And we don't actually have proof that this is directly about Saul, but he did do necromancy, which is trying to talk to dead ancestors and stuff like that. And so he was definitely dabbling in other spiritual practices outside of monotheism. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was saying, also, not everyone in Israel all the time, just worship him.
Yeah.
It was a very mixture of, we're going to worship Asherah, too, we're going to do this, all these different things. So
Cover all the bases.
Yeah. Culture's complicated.
Yeah.
Always. Doesn't matter where it is. Especially in the ancient Near East, really complicated. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful.
What strikes me is it says those who run after other gods will suffer more and more. What's funny is that sometimes I'm quick to think subconsciously God's the one, God's not happy, and so he's going to bring suffering to those people, or life's not going to work out as well. The God's involved in that. But actually, it sounds like it's just, this is just what happens. If you don't follow this God, you don't follow God, you're going to suffer more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that he's the holy people of the land, that's where all my delight is. And then he doesn't say, and the people who follow other gods, that's where all my disdain is. He says, no, they're just suffering. It's empathetic.
More and more.
Yeah, more and more, yeah. More and more.
I just think I want to build off what Deanna was saying. It's kind of he's not making them suffer, but I feel like most people have put all of their eggs in one basket, or have tried to look for joy in one thing or the other and lets them down. And I feel like that's where I make that connection. You pour your life into something. You see athletes especially, they pour their life into something and they get hurt, and they're just done.
Exactly.
You pour your life into one thing or the other, and it could just one day be gone. think that's what we're learning in COVID as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, I think that's kind of they're trying to say.
Totally. Yeah, I got a David Foster Wallace quote that just says what you just said.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read in a second.
We watched this documentary. Do you remember the name of it?
Yeah.
Yes. It was really good. It's called The Social Dilemma. Terrifying, but very good. So I kind of think of like this about tech, like about like my addiction to my phone a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm going to it because I want to like find some peace and get a little bit of happiness, get my shot of dopamine, and then I just keep doing it, and it does kind of feel like suffering more and more. Does that make sense? Like it's
Yeah.
not.
And I have disdain
I'm
for
getting
others.
more and more. I'm getting more and more addicted, more and more frustrated that it's not fitting my needs, and I'm still drawn to it, and it just made me think.
Yeah, man. We all know our little pet sins and how they make us suffer more. Yeah. This is an interesting juxtaposition. It says, I'm not going to pour out libations of blood. So that's like blood sacrifices to other gods. God, you are my portion and cup. So I'm not going to feed you other gods. I'm going to let you feed me. Talk about that. Oh, I love that. Talk about that.
That is good.
Yeah. You know I'm going to rock on that idea. Come on.
Just that idea just runs through the entire Bible.
Yeah.
God creating the garden for us, and
Yeah.
bringing His people out of Egypt, and providing the land from the land come to dwell. He would provide for them, and Jesus Himself coming.
Yeah.
And our gift, God with us, God for us, and the Holy Spirit being God within us. Like, yeah, it's just all there.
Yeah.
You can see it. You can see that narrative running throughout all Scripture.
Yeah.
That's what God continues to give us. And it starts in the garden, where compared to other ancient Near Eastern cultures, it's not about humans being slaves building a temple for God to dwell in. It's about God creating a world for humans to dwell in and Him to dwell with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't really put those puzzle pieces together. More thoughts? I'm going to push this along because I want us to talk about ourselves.
It just.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Get that thought out, girl.
It's not like unique. It's just I'm
Get it out. Come on.
It's really awesome that that nothing like that he understands his relationship with God, where it's like this picture of grace. Like I don't have to pour out libations. Like more than anything, like I know that you want me to like be with you and have you be my cup. Do you know, like I'm just reiterating.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
But
it's good.
it's really beautiful. Like David knows that that's not required, you know.
Yeah.
That actually God wants him to like be with him. That is what their relationship is, you know. Where all the other people that are worshiping all the other gods are kind of terrified of those gods. That's why they're like pouring out the blood so that the God doesn't like take their own blood, you know.
Yeah.
And that's just completely 180 from this relationship that David has with God.
Yes.
It's not about blood.
Yes. If you're trying to talk, Lisette, you're.
Yeah. I'm ready. Can I talk?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, going along with what Deanna said about my cup, and I guess I've just never thought of it in that way, where it's just my portion and my cup. Like it's unending. It's consistent. It's 3 days or 3 times a day, you know, morning, noon, and night. I'm going to be having breakfast, having lunch, having dinner with God, and He's always going to be giving me what I need. He's always going to be refilling my cup. And I mean, to put that into my own perspective, like any time of the day I'm feeling dry, I'm feeling weary, I'm feeling just done, I can always just come to Him, and He's going to be consistently there to refill my cup. Yeah. Be my portion.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
That's good.
And it's not like you were my portion or you are today. It's what's the grammar for that where it's like infinite? Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's what it is. Like you are. You are
All you can eat buffet.
now and forever. My cup. Not just, while I'm
Yeah.
turning away from Saul.
Yeah. So prehistoric people, this is across all continents. There's always been this evolution of human thought that lands on animal sacrifice. It's just a natural way that human thought develops is animal sacrifice. And for most people throughout time until like the 1800s, there was no separation between what was spirit and what was material. The idea that those could be different things was what they've been like, what are you talking about? There's no different. So like the wind was a god, the rain was a god, the sun was a god. And so if they got into a place where there's drought or famine or war, the natural thought is, oh my gosh, we have pissed off the gods. And so we need to sacrifice something for them. Like what's some kind of gift that we can give them to be on the right side of things with them, right? And so it starts out as like wheat, like the gods give us wheat. Thank you for the wheat. We're going to give some of the wheat back as a thank you to stay on the right side of things with you. But the problem is it always has to escalate, because if you have a good year, then you got to give more that year because the gods gave you more. And if you have a bad year, clearly the gods are angry at you, so you got to give more wheat. Okay, maybe the wheat's not working. Like, let's up it. Let's give something more precious. Like, let's give a bird. That's not working. Let's give a goat. And so this escalates in pretty much all cultures, all continents, to practicing human sacrifice. And so it happened in China, in the Middle East, in the Americas, Europe, at Stonehenge. That was actually a place that they would sacrifice humans and shoot them with arrows. The Vikings, they had funeral pyres in India. In Tanzania, they would sacrifice albinos. They burned infants alive in Carthage. They clubbed people to death in Hawaii. They would suffocate children inside a blanket in Inca. Yeah, literally everywhere people have come to the same conclusion. Like, when things go wrong, the gods are angry at us, and we need to get on the right side of things with them. And actually, our culture is an outlier in the history of humanity in that we really don't worry about being on the wrong side of things with God. And I think a lot of it comes from, we feel like we can control. There's these forces that most people groups have seen as outside their control. And we see everything is inside of our control because of science. And of course that's like getting challenged by the pandemic. Just the fact that has thrown us off of this, one of the most central questions in life, which is, how do I get right with the powers beyond me? How do I get right with my creator? We need to ask that question, right? And so our gods are different. We worship money and image, and we worship control and all that stuff. This was her point, and David Foster Wallace puts it super well. He's not a Christian, but he's basically saying if you worship anything other than some kind of divinity, it's going to eat you alive. And yeah, so I'm gonna read this. If you've been around for more than 2 years, you've heard this before, but you could probably hear it every 6 months. So, in the day-to-day life, in the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. Bob Dylan, Bob Dylan song. You gotta serve somebody. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, be it JC or Allah or Yahweh or the wicked mother goddess of the Four Noble Truths or some infrangible set of ethical principles, is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally plant you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, bromides, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. Worship power, you'll feel weak and afraid, and you'll need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you'll end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. The insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful, it's that they're all unconscious. They are default settings. They're the kind of worship you just gradually slip into day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. And the world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings, because the world of men and money and power hums along quite nicely on the fuel of fear and contempt and frustration and craving and the worship of self. Our own present culture has harnessed these forces in ways that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom to be lords of our own tiny, skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. Those who run after other gods will suffer more and more. You're going to need to binge and purge to way less. You're going to need to have longer hangovers to deal with how much you were drinking. You're going to have to cut out time for meaningful community because you're obsessed with what your boss thinks. You might even end up suicidal because other gods demand libations of our own blood. But the God that Jesus showed us that the real God is the exact opposite of that, right? This Hebrews 10 God says, all the sacrifices are done. It's over. I don't need your blood. I want to spill my blood. I don't need you to feed me. I want to feed you. I don't need you to nourish me. I want to nourish you. That's the gospel. Whenever you find yourself thinking God needs something from you, that's supernatural. That's superhuman. And it's the opposite of the gospel. And it's going to rob all the spiritual power of the Christian walk from your life. So when we, please hear that I'm not saying you, when we think that we need to give God these payments of a little bit of a quiet time, or we think we need to give God these payments of generosity, God doesn't need anything from you. God doesn't need anything from you. And even the time that he wants to spend with you, it's because he wants to give you the things that he has in him, to give them to you, to give you his perspective and peace and rest, right? In a second, when we do breakouts, we're going to talk about how have we seen our Christian activity as these sacrifices or payments that we need to give to God. But first, I want one brave soul to talk about how that's happened for them, and explore a little bit, like, where do those thoughts come from? So who wants to be a guinea pig and talk about that? I know there's one brave soul. I should have told you guys it was only gonna be one, because then it'd be like, oh, we're all gonna do it. All right. Who wants to do it? Deanna's disqualified. You don't get to.
I'll just
Go for it.
Because I mean, I definitely fell into it, but there was the church culture that I came from and out of was just all about essentially, like, getting people to to serve or to do something in order, because that was part of their discipleship process, or like whatever. Like, you just needed kids for the volunteers for the children's ministry on Sunday. Like
Yeah.
that's really what it came down to. But it kind of like I realized what I ended up doing was just enslaving people into a system which they thought in order to be to show a sign of their maturity or to be a part of the in group was to have to like give time and sacrifice, probably to a point of too much that would end up hurting themselves and hurting the people around them. So I don't know, that was an experience that I had, some of it personally and definitely some of it just watching other people go through it and knowing like, well, this doesn't actually help them. It's not showing that God truly loves them and cares about them. And I'm letting them rest. Like, what's the like? It's literally the opposite. It's like one of the 10 Commandments. Like to actually take time off. So it just doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah.
That was kind of my experience.
So how do you think that where did that idea come from, and how do you think you bought into it?
Well, it came from. I mean, do you want me to go like really like? You want me to go big picture, or do you want me to like?
What do you want to do?
I always go big picture.
Yeah, go big picture. Okay.
We had that conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's like an American thing. Like that, American culture is just built upon growth and built upon becoming bigger and better and more powerful, and worship things like growth and success and power. And that's what Egypt did. Egypt worshipped growth, success, and power, and enslaved people and built their kingdoms. So, church in America is
How did buying into that thought affect you? How did buying into that thought affect you?
Affect me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Yeah. So that's what it did. So,
yeah.
I mean, I can go into more details. We've talked about it.
Right.
Yeah. So that was.
Yeah. Chris, that's not the gospel.
No, it's not at all. It's not the gospel at all.
Dude, look at me.
What?
God doesn't need anything from you.
No, he doesn't. I know. I've been living in that for the past year and a half now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No, God doesn't need anything from us, and we get to. It's about finding rest and enjoyment, and not about anything else. So as soon as it becomes about a mission or a mission or I don't know, like saving the world, stuff like that. Just like I know I'm gonna say it, but you know what I mean by it. Like saving people's souls or whatever, yes, obviously that's important. But when it becomes about going to somewhere where when you die, instead of about heaven coming here now and walking in the reality of that, it just becomes twisted and it's not the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Yeah. I'm glad that you're meeting God's real heart after getting sucked into that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. In a second we're gonna
Can I share my story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I know you didn't want me to.
It's all right.
Qualified, but I feel like a lot of, maybe even especially females, can relate. Like, I think that I was taught, or for some reason, I grew up and have lived my life with the understanding that if I'm nice, then people will like me. If I'm good, then people will like me. If I'm smart, then I can be successful. And it's just all about like what I bring to the table, and I'm judged by that. Like if I'm good, then you will love me. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of just been implicitly the way that I've lived my life. And so clearly, like of course that's going to carry over into my relationship with Jesus, where it's like you're like if I'm like good and I spend time with you daily and I do ministry, like then you'll love me. And that's just totally not great for me, because then it means like if I haven't done these things, then I feel like God's maybe unhappy with me, or there's just so many more hurdles that I feel like I have to get through to actually be with Jesus.
Yeah.
And those are just all self-imposed. Like Jesus doesn't require any of that, and I put those in the way. And that's just been very hard. Like I still fight that lie in my head, like that I have to be good to have God like affirm me or be happy that I'm doing ministry, or
Yeah. Before we move on, I have preached this kind of message before and had people, like kind of amateur people, take me as saying like, you don't need to do any habits, you don't need to do any discipline. It's more that you need to realize that those disciplines and those habits, they're for you, they're not for God. It's because you need those things. Yeah. So we're gonna take communion. And yeah, communion is God giving himself to us and saying, nourish yourself on me, right? It's God saying, I want to be your portion and I want to be your cup. So when we go to the table and as we have some silence, afterwards we're going to break into groups of 3. The reflection questions are right there. Has your Christian activity felt like sacrifices you're making for God, or like ways God is feeding you? If the answer is sacrifices for God, what would it take for you to change your mentality? And how is God inviting you to take delight in the holy people of the land? So whichever one of those you feels most relevant to you right now to think about in the silence, and then we'll break out. But yeah, as you go up there, like, just ask God, like, what is it going to take for me to let you nourish me instead of thinking I got to feed you? Yeah, God, you're here, and we are silent, and we need you. If you want to take communion, feel free to. If you're from one household and could share one plate, that's the way to go. You gave up a wife and a family. You gave your gold to be alone with me, to be alone with me, to be alone with me. You went up on the street. To be alone with me, you went up on the tree. Never know a man who loved me. Yeah, God, Lisette's thing that you're constantly available, morning and night. Yeah, please be our portion and cup. Amen. Break into groups of 3 or 4 if you want, and talk about the questions.